Hello everybody, Vektor 99 back with another video, guys. This is a video I've kind of wanted to make for quite a long time. I want to talk about today those of you that are just starting out with indie game development, or you've decided that indie game development is what you want to do. So I think a lot of people look at Steam and they look at all the indie games and they look at some of these indie games that are coming out on Steam, games like Supermarket Simulator made by a single developer, and all these other games that are blowing off the charts and make a ton of money by maybe one or two indie developers putting it out, and they think, man, I could do that. I have a great idea. And a lot of you guys think because you have a great idea for an indie game and you just know that everybody would buy it, and you fantasize about all the features and all the cool stuff that this game would have. And you're like, man, if only I become an indie developer, I can make this super really cool MMO where, Call of Duty meets Dead by Daylight, but it's also going to have a little bit of World of Warcraft mixed in, and then I'm also going to put these elements from Diablo in, but I'm going to make sure that I don't have any of the bad stuff that's in all these games. All that stuff's going to be gone, and you go over these features and these little ideas that are in your mind of how great this game will be. And all you need to do is buy some assets. Go to the asset stores, put some assets on a map, figure out how to make them work, and man, your indie game can do well too. So I want to go ahead and talk about this, guys, while I'm showing some gameplay of my 9th indie game, which I call Vektor Z. Now, this is a game I put out back in early 2022, a game that I wanted to make more kind of asteroids-like over my first indie game, which was Rock and Roll, which I kind of steered really far away from asteroids, and I wanted to make a game more, or at least more closely resemble the asteroids that I grew up with as a kid. But I wanted to make my game be unique in the fact that it would offer 7 different facets, or 7 different vectors, if you would. That's why I call it Vektor Z, and 7 different game modes essentially that you would go through as you tried to level up. I came up with vector stars that you would collect, and the vector stars would allow you to, enhance your ship and save it permanently. So once you enhance your ship, you would get things like extra firepower, extra thrust power, things like that. You could also buy different colored ships and so forth. So as we watch me play my Vektor Z game, guys, I can't more strongly encourage you, if you're wanting to be an indie game developer, or if you're starting out making indie games, I highly encourage all of you to stop looking at the Unity Asset Store, the Unreal Marketplace, and looking at all these different assets that you think might be able to make your idea come to life. Instead, I want you to take your idea that you have for an indie game, and for most of you, I want you to tune that idea way down. I want you to greatly simplify it, even to maybe a 2D game or a top-down game, and maybe even start from scratch and think of something simple. Try to think of something a little unique that has, maybe it's a classic game, maybe it's classic, Donkey Kong or whatever, but you have your own idea and you have your own twist on how you can make it cool, how you can make it vary a little bit. Whatever it is, but simplify your idea, scale it way, way down. So I'm going to go ahead and be completely honest with most of you that have this great idea, that think you have a great idea for, an indie game. A lot of you guys, I know this because I've seen it myself firsthand. A lot of people think that they have a great idea for what would be an amazing game. Almost everybody has an idea, especially if you're a gamer. You've been a gamer for any amount of time, you probably have some idea of a game that you would love to make that you think is absolutely brilliant. And if only you could find an indie developer who can make your dream come true, hell, you would only take 30-40% of the overall profits because your idea is that damn good. Maybe you would even demand 50% of the sales if only you could find a developer or any developers who can bring it to life. So I'm gonna be completely honest. If you're in that group and you think you have an amazing idea that would turn into a great game, you probably don't. Okay? I'll be completely honest. Nobody wants your idea. Your idea for a game is not worth anything. Okay? Your idea for a game is probably garbage, right? And the reason it's probably garbage, especially if you've never created a game, is because turning your idea into a playable game that's actually going to be fun is hard, right? So let's assume that you found a development team or an indie developer that's going to turn your idea into a playable game. First of all, they're probably going to have to scale your idea way down because what you're imagining as a game and what they could actually put into the game is probably way different. And then even then, once they put your idea into a game, into a workable game, chances are that what you think would be an amazing game probably wouldn't be that much fun to play, and it wouldn't be anything, close to what you fantasize in your head about how amazing it would be. So that's the truth. Ideas for games are a dime a dozen. They really are. So it's one thing to have an idea for a game or an idea that you think would be a great game, and it's a completely another thing to actually make your idea and put that into a game, make it workable, make it actually function, and make it fun as well. So most indie developers are plentiful on ideas. Most indie developers have a dozen game ideas in mind at any given time, if not way more. So indie developers are not lacking on ideas, and at least the indie developers that have ideas probably have ideas that are way better than your amazing, breakout game that you think is going to make $1 million. Most indie developers' ideas for games they kind of have on the back burner are way better because they're probably 100 times more realistic, and they're probably going to be at least 10 times more fun once they're actually put onto the screen. Once they're actually developed, if you would. So I know that hurts. I know you probably think I'm speaking a bunch of smack, but remember guys, I have 14 games under my belt right now, and I know how to put ideas and how to put creativity into a game. I know how to take a concept, and I know a lot of ways to make a game fun. I think I'm very good at adding sound effects and making sound effects fit my ideas for games. I'm also think I'm pretty good right now at being able to figure out, hey, if a game's fun or not, if it's not fun, how to make the game more fun, and changing my idea until at least I feel like it's fun. So that's the kind of a harsh reality for so many of you guys out there that think you have $1 million idea and that your idea for a game is worth X amount of money. No, it's not. Your idea isn't worth anything. I hate to break it to you. Like I said, ideas for games are a dime a dozen. Everybody has them. Everybody that's a gamer has ideas. And your ideas are probably garbage simply because they're not even feasible to put into a game. What you're imagining and what's actually feasible to put into a game are probably worlds apart. So when we talk about developing indie games and we talk about making them come true, if you're really thinking about becoming an indie developer, I can encourage you, like I said, to start small. Start with a really small game. And I don't care if it's tic-tac-toe. I don't care if you're going to remake Plastic Snake or remake a simple Pac-Man game, or like I mentioned earlier, your own twist and version of Donkey Kong. Something simple. Start off with a square and you're trying to avoid, or maybe you're a circle and you're trying to avoid squares and trapezoids on the screen. Keep the idea and the concept simple and make that work. And then once you make that game work, once you make it so you're a circle and you're avoiding squares and trapezoids and maybe the more sides of the shape there are, the more difficult and challenging that opponent is. So, for example, a square is not as tough as a trapezoid, and maybe a diamond is another shape that doesn't have as many sides as a square, so the diamonds are maybe the easiest enemy you have. So kind of think those kind of thoughts and think really simple. And for your first game, I'm talking about, right? And then what you do is you make that so you can move your circle around, right? Make it so you can move your circle around. Then you got to think of other ideas. Okay, once you have a circle and you can move it around, how fast are you going to go? You got to make sure the speed works. Are you going to have a dash? If you hit the right mouse button or the space bar or whatever, is it going to be a dash? Are you going to be able to move quicker? Right? And then we got to start putting enemies on the screen. Okay, let's start with like 3 diamonds and a couple of squares coming at you on the screen. Well, you got to think of things like if you're the circle, you want to make sure you're not just spawning the diamonds and the squares almost not on top of the player, because that's not going to be fun. That feels cheap to the player. So you've got to start thinking, okay, well, I need to spawn these enemies off the screen and then have the enemies home in on the player. Things that will feel more natural to the player and less cheap and unfun. And this is the kind of things that I'm talking about when you start making a game. You've got to start thinking about these little concepts. Okay, then you got to think, okay, when I hit the edge of the screen, am I going to wrap around to the other side? Am I going to take damage if I hit the edge of the screen? Am I going to die because there's a laser going around the border of the screen? Or maybe I'm going to have a bigger map and, you can move the map. The screen's going to actually move with my player as I move up or down or to the side until I get to the edge of the map. These are all things that you've got to, figure out how you want your game to play. Even for a really simple game, there's a big thought process. There's a bunch of decisions that you have to make based on even a simple idea. So what I'm saying, guys, is to start with a really simple idea, like what I'm saying. You're a circle, you're avoiding different shapes, and you're trying to last as long as you can. Okay, well, how are you going to kill these shapes? Now you have another decision to make. Do you shoot? Or maybe you have to find a gun before you can shoot. Maybe to start with, you have no weapon at all. And what you have to do is try to run these shapes into fires that you place randomly around the screen. Well, if I run these diamonds and squares into fires or into a burning barrel or whatever, then the shapes burn up and catch on fire or they die. While at the same time, you as a player have to avoid these fires or burning barrels. That could be fun. And then eventually, after you kill 10 enemies or whatever, maybe, a gun spawns somewhere on the screen. And then you finally get a shoot as more challenging enemies and trapezoids and more complex shapes come onto the screen and start coming after your player. So this is a very simple idea. It's a 2D game, or maybe it's a 3D game. Maybe, you're going to make the game in 3D Unreal or Unity. And maybe your shape is like a sphere instead of a 2D circle. That could be fun as well. And so now you have to make decisions. Okay, is it going to be first person or is it going to be third person where I can see my own circle? If you're going to do it 3D, that could be fun as well. But again, you're keeping it simple, because putting a box or a diamond or a circle or a sphere in a 3D map and a 3D engine like Unity or Unreal or even Godot, that's going to be a hell of a lot easier than having to buy complex assets. And complex assets with, thousands or tens of thousands of polygons are going to take up a lot more system memory and a lot more graphic card memory and may lag your game down, especially as you are a new developer and you may not have or know the most efficient ways to code your game, okay, and make it work. So starting simple with simple shapes is going to be a lot better to start off with. And then later on, right, maybe you can expand your game from the simple shapes that you start with, and you could start making those enemies actually look, be zombies or be something more complex. You could start off as a military soldier, and you're trying to escape a military base that's owned by an evil corporation, and so all the enemies now that were once diamonds and squares and trapezoids and so forth, maybe now these turn into evil military soldiers or whatever. And each one has a different look or outfit or whatever. But start simple. Start with the shapes first. get the shapes in there, whether you're going to go 3D or 2D, it doesn't really matter. Simply start simple, right? And then once you get that base game working, well, now it's working and you play it yourself, and you got to think to yourself as you're playing it, is this fun? Okay, I got a game here, but actually this isn't that much fun. So then you have to start thinking of ways how to make your game fun. Now, making the game, you need to understand that making the simple game have complex graphics and forests and tons of textures and assets and, a sun going down in the back and rain coming down and thunder in the distance and stuff like that. That all adds spice and, polish to the game, but that's not going to make it fun. So the first thing you need to do is take that simple game that you have and make it fun before you ever even think about going out and buying all these assets that you're going to put into the game, and before you think about buying that weather asset and the thunder asset that you're going to put in the game, and before you think about buying all these really cool map assets to, make your game in. No, just leave it a blank canvas, and if you want to make walls or rocks or whatever, just put those into your game as gray rocks or whatever, and make it fun first with very simple assets that you can create yourself that you don't have to purchase. Because if you can't make a game fun and fun to play with just really simplistic assets or shapes, then it's probably not going to be fun if you buy super polished assets and backgrounds and weather and all that good stuff like that. All that stuff right now is just it's going to get in the way, and it's going to help you make good screenshots or maybe a really good 20-second trailer or whatever. But the game isn't going to be fun because you haven't tested it out with a simple base idea and made the game fun first. And as an indie developer, I don't know, as an indie game reviewer myself on YouTube, I don't know how many games I've played over the years where I know damn well that the person who pumped this trash game out doesn't enjoy the shit that he's selling on Steam. The shit that I'm playing. It's just absolutely so broken and so monotonous and so boring that there's no way I can even imagine the developer playing the game. Now, I get that, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and everybody might think something different. But I guarantee you, so many of these bad games that I've played over the years, I guarantee you the developer isn't playing that game themselves, because there's 1,000 other games that are similar that can be even played for free that are just way more fun. And people that are putting together, for example, an FPS shooter and putting it up on Steam, their game is so broken and fundamentally flawed and just not fun to play that I guarantee you this indie developer who made this game is not playing their own game, but they're out there playing a polished, Call of Duty or, one of the many hundreds or thousands of polished FPS shooters that are just way more fun to play and way less buggy. Okay? I've seen it way too many times over the years, guys. Indie developers will go out there, and too many indie developers right now think that the key to making a good game is out there going and purchasing either asset kits or assets and then cobbling together these assets. They don't have a clue on game design. They don't have a clue how to code. They don't have a clue how to make things work as they envision, right? They just know how to go out there and purchase assets and put them on a map and then basically duct tape them up or, manipulate the drop-down menus in the Unity engine or the Unreal engine until the game half-ass works, and then they try to basically bullshit everybody as to how great the game is. They take the best little recordings of their particular cobbled-together garbage, put it up on as a Steam trailer, and they don't show the combat, or they don't show anything good about the game, or not good, but they show good things, the best possible scenes they can get, like, for example, an enemy's head, getting cut off, and they put that on there because the only reason they can show that is because they bought a deheading asset on the marketplace, right? So they're basically showing off this zombie being deheaded or whatever, but they don't know how to make that work. They didn't code that head to be, dissected or cut off by the player. They bought an asset to do that, and they, basically cobbled it into their fucking mess, and then they show about how to actually make that work if they didn't have that particular asset. And this is why I say, guys, keep it simple. Learn the fundamentals of making a simple game first, and then learn how to make that really simple game with simple shapes and simple assets that you can make yourself. Learn how to make that particular simple game fun, and then learn how to make it even more fun. And then once you learn how to make that fun, then learn things on how to make it, okay, let's make this work with a controller. Well, let's make this game actually be able to save your score. How do I save your score to the Steam, right? How do I upload the score to the Steam leaderboard so I can have a high score list in the game? Things like that are all things that, fundamentals that you want to actually learn. Okay, well, I also want to have an inventory. I want to be able to, if my player I want to make it so the player can save the game halfway through, but I need it to save that he has picked up a gun, or that the player's picked up a machine gun, or that he's picked up 3 grenades, right? If the player saves a game, I need to learn how to save this inventory to the player's, computer. And I need to be able to retrieve that data so that if the player comes back later and loads his saved game, it loads back exactly where he was. The enemies are all in the same spot, and the player has exactly the same inventory. Much the same fashion, I also need to make sure I'm putting in fundamental settings into my game. Like sound, for example. I don't know how many times I've played an indie game on Steam, where there was no audio settings. Why the hell are you charging money for a game where you don't even have a sound slider or a way to increase or decrease the volume, and you launch your game at 100% volume? It blows the user's speakers or ears off if he's wearing a headset, and there's no way to adjust the volume except going to the computer. You never want a user to have to go to their volume mixer in Windows or on their computer to lower the volume. No, that should be a setting right inside your game. I don't know how many games I've played, guys, over the years, indie games I've played, where there's no way to quit, where hitting the escape key does nothing, and you have to force quit the game. These are all huge no-nos if you're putting a game on Steam, especially if you're charging money for it. Where there's no option at all to make the game windowed or, full screen. Why are you putting a game out on Steam where the player can't make a windowed or a full screen of your game, and it starts off in some super small window? Remember that some people have 4K monitors, and so even if your window takes up most of your monitor, maybe you have a 1920 by 1080 monitor, right? Well, what about all those people that have a 4K monitor where that 1600 by 900 window or smaller is going to only take up, an eighth of the screen on somebody who has a much higher resolution, on somebody that has a 4K resolution? Your windowed game that takes up most of your monitor is going to look super small, and if you don't have a way to make that windowed game full screen as a setting in your game, what the hell are you doing? You're not putting any kind of thought into your game. You're just pumping something out as quickly and lazily as you can. And this is the kind of stuff that it's mind-numbingly asinine. For somebody to be putting out a game that has no volume settings, has no way to quit the game, you have to force quit the game, it has no way to even change the game from window to full screen. This is the kind of stuff that I feel like these are must-haves in any game. Now, obviously, nice touches would be things like keybinds and have graphic settings so you can turn off shadows and, change the resolution and change the texture quality and stuff like that, especially if it's a 3D game or whatever. These are the kind of things that are nice to haves for settings, but the very base, like requirements, I think, for settings for any game, or things like being able to window or full screen, volume settings, right? Essentially, you could just have one volume slider for everything, but having several volume sliders so a user can change the music volume, the sound effects volume, and if you have voices in your game, be able to change and increase and decrease that volume level as well, based on their own preferences. So just have at least the basic settings in your game. And I can't say it enough, guys, with your games, you have to make sure that you enjoy playing the game yourself. Because if you don't enjoy playing your game, how the hell are you going to sell it to people on Steam and expect them to enjoy a game you don't even enjoy playing yourself? The first and most important requirement, I think, is that you're making a game that you yourself enjoy playing. I am so tired of looking at indie games where I go in and I look at the indie developer's profile, and 2 years after they launch a game, I see that they only have 0.9 hours in their own game, or they only have 1.5 hours in their own game. Guys, I can tell you for all 14 of my games, right, I have nearly 100 hours, or way more than 100 hours in my own game. For example, Rock and Roll, I think I have over 500 hours of playtime in my own game. A lot of my games, I have 200-300 hours in my own game because I enjoy the games that I make, right? And I also need to let you guys know as indie developers, you guys need to drop the fantasy, drop the bullshit idea that, hey, you're going to put out your first game and it's going to make $1 million. Your game has such clever, unique features and things that, you know, nobody's ever seen, that once you launch your game without marketing or anything like that, oh, your game's definitely going to make a lot of money. You're going to be rich. You're going to make $100,000 on your first game, and then maybe your second or third game, you're going to be a millionaire. Guys, I can tell you that unless you get extremely lucky, or unless you have some way to pay for tons of marketing, or unless your game just is 1 in a million, like Stardew Valley, for example, your game is probably going to be lucky to make the $100 back that it costs to put up on Steam. I think I've read statistics before. It's been a while since I've seen one, but I'm pretty sure I saw statistics that say like 80-something% of all indie games that are put on Steam don't even make their $100 back. Ever. Not, you know, hey, it takes a year to make their $100 back. No, I think it's like 88% or something like that. Like close to 90% of all indie games that are ever put on Steam never even make the $100 back that it costs to put the game on Steam. And that's not including time and work spent making the game. That's not including the investment if you do buy any music or if you do buy any assets and stuff like that. Think of how much money people are spending on assets and music and sound effects and whatever. You know, you got to drop that idea. You got to be willing to put out games and expect nothing in return. In fact, I need you to expect losing $100, because many of you guys will launch a game and it'll sell 2 or 3 copies after the refunds have cleared the dust, and then after it launches, you know, weeks go by and then pretty much nobody's buying your game, and you've essentially made nothing. And that's what you need to expect of your first game, no matter how brilliant you think it is. Expect nothing. Expect to lose money on your first game. Until you've made some games and you have some experience under your belt, then maybe you can go by experience on how much money each game makes and how much better your games are getting and how much more popular they're getting. Then you can start putting some reasonable expectations on what you expect from your next game. But until you have any experience with your net sales and your revenue on Steam, you need to expect to just lose your $100. And then that way, if you do make $50 on the game, or you do get really lucky and you make your $100 back, well, then you're really happy because you've set your expectations at a realistic level. So with that, guys, hopefully this helps some indie developers out there, or maybe wannabe indie developers. I just want you guys to think of the fundamentals and simplify your ideas and really think about, you know, what it is that you want to make. Really think about narrowing your scope way down, make something simple, keep it simple during the entire process, and then make it fun. Make it where you enjoy playing it. And then you're going to, you know, I guarantee you're going to have a lot more success than if you just go out there and cobble a bunch of pretty assets together and, you know, you don't know what the hell you're doing. So you need to learn the base fundamentals of a game. I really hope this helps some indie developers out there. I hope this kind of puts a realistic expectations for you on, you know, your game idea that you think is worth $1 million. It's not. And put some realistic expectations on you on what to expect, even if you spend 6 months or a year or 2 years making your dream game. Expect nothing as a profit. And then if you do make a profit, or you do, you know, get some good sales numbers on Steam, then you're really happy. I would much rather this happen to you than to go in expecting, you know, putting 2 years of work into your game, expecting to make $1 million, and then you only make $200. And then you're so frustrated and disappointed that you never want to make an indie game again. This has been Zaxter99, guys. This has been Zaxter99. Thanks so much, everybody, and you guys have a good one. Peace out.